Well, Ukraine attacked the Kerch Bridge again for the third time, so let's get into what we know. The Ukrainian military put out a statement saying, quote, "The security service of Ukraine has carried out a new, unique special operation and struck the Crimean bridge for the third time." That's the footage you're seeing on the screen here. This time, underwater. The operation lasted several months. SBU agents planted explosives on the supports of this illegal structure, and today at 4:44 a.m., without any civilian casualties, the first explosive device was detonated. The underwater pillars of the bridge supports were severely damaged at the seabed level, thanks to 1,100 kilograms of explosives in TNT equivalent. As a result, the bridge is now in critical condition. So a couple of key points I want to pull from that statement. First off, unique special operation is the same language Ukraine used, like word for word, when describing Operation Spiderweb, the attack a couple days ago against Russian strategic aviation. So it makes you think that maybe there's a trend here and we're going to start seeing more of these unique one-off special operations targeting significant Russian assets. The next part here, carrying it out at 4:44 a.m. deliberately without any civilian casualties. That's an important piece here because unlike strategic bombers parked on a military airfield, this is civilian infrastructure. It's dual use. There's a lot of military usage to it, and there's a lot of symbolic messaging here as well when it comes to the Kerch Bridge. But there are, day in and day out, civilians traversing that bridge. And if Ukraine were to set off an explosive charge and kill civilians, that would lead the headlines, less than the actual damage to the bridge. So going at a time where there's limited to no civilians or any traffic on the bridge was clearly a smart move. And the last part here, the first explosive device was detonated. Excuse me? As in, like, others? More? You wouldn't say, if it was the only one, you wouldn't say the first, right? So we'll see. Maybe there's others planted around, and that kind of gets into projecting what this might mean big picture. Now, according to Russian media, the traffic was on and then off, and right now it seems like, according to TASS, traffic has resumed across the Kerch Bridge. And the messaging from Russia was a little bit all over the place, to be expected. Right out the gate, we saw Russian accounts jumping in saying, it's fine, they missed, this was an unsuccessful attack, don't worry about it. Like, too early. Like, less than 5 minutes after the footage came out, people were saying, not a problem at all here. Which, when you look at the blast happening underwater against support structures of a bridge, there's no way you're fully assessing that damage without putting people underwater and doing a detailed investigation, which is probably underway right now, but that takes a long time. Nonetheless, Russia is confident enough at this point to resume traffic across the bridge. Another key aspect here I want to call out is when you look at the footage, this came from Russian security cameras. Ukraine released footage from Russian security cameras. So at the very least, it shows that in this instance, as they have in previous attacks, Ukraine has access to the video feeds of Russian security systems, if not more. Just something to keep back in mind. Now, turning to the Russian accounts of all of this, Rybar said, quote, "At 5 a.m., another enemy attempt to attack the Crimean bridge occurred. But if earlier these launches were of UAVs, missiles, and unmanned aerial vehicles, this time the Ukrainian armed forces hit the facility with an underwater vehicle. The explosion occurred near one of the supports, but it was not damaged. The impact was on the protective barriers. Some of the debris was thrown onto the roadway, traffic was temporarily blocked, and now it continues as usual. What happened was expected, so preparations for such a scenario have been underway for a long time. The supports were surrounded by protective measures. Rows of boom barriers were erected near the bridge. As you can see, it was not in vain." Again, I think it's a little bit early to say definitively one way or the other. There might be long-term damage done to the bridge that's going to take weeks or even months to play out. I would not risk saying that no damage was done at this point. There's a little deeper dive Torsten Heinrich put together on this, getting into kind of the location of the charges and what explosive devices do underwater that I'll link in the description below. He's always worth checking out. But Rybar continued on here by saying, "There is nothing to be happy about quite yet, especially against the backdrop of events in the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. The summer, judging by everything, will be hot." And so there were drone strikes last night in a couple occupied territories, Kherson and Zaporozhye, that we'll get to in a minute. But real quick, wanted to give you an update on the fundraiser we're doing with Ukraine Aid Operations. We initially set a goal of $50,000, and due to your all generosity, which is incredible and humbling every single day, we blew past that like before I could even release the first interview that we had scheduled. Just this morning, I put it out. It was talking with an intelligence officer from the 3rd Assault Brigade and the commander of their unmanned ground vehicle unit, talking about how they're using those UGVs in modern warfare. It was really interesting. I liked it. Baroda and Linguist, pretty solid guys, and thankful that they took time out of their busy day to talk about current tactics at the front. But nonetheless, we increased the fundraising amount to $70,000 so we can get a couple more of these interviews in that are lined up. Those are going to go towards picking up more UGVs and recon drones. This is through a 501c3 registered nonprofit, very transparent organization. If interested and able, the link to contribute is in the description below. Now, continuing on, I think it's worth addressing why the Kerch Bridge matters at all. And this one's a little bit complicated because when you look at, say, the Ukrainian attacks against Russian strategic aircraft the other day, very clearly those are military assets. Those are aircraft that are being used to conduct strikes inside Ukraine on a pretty regular basis. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why destroying the enemy's military capabilities are important. The Kerch Bridge is a little bit different. Again, we're talking about dual use here because all day, every day, there are civilians traversing this bridge back and forth, but there's also a military component here as well. They do use the rail line and the roads to transport trucks, men, military equipment to and from occupied Crimea. Now, in terms of, so there's an aspect here where if Ukraine is able to shut that off, it will hamper Russian logistics in the peninsula. This is the sole land connection between mainland Russia and the Crimean Peninsula. Of course, if it was entirely severed, Russia still would have the ability to deliver supplies via boat or via air, so it's not like it would be completely cut off, or via the land bridge in the north, right? Now, that one can be a little more susceptible to Ukrainian long-range fires and drone strikes, but nonetheless, the elimination of the Kerch Bridge or even shutting it down for a day or two does not completely isolate the peninsula. Now, the bridge, talking about the symbolic nature of it here, which, again, I don't want to risk putting a percentage on it. It's greater than 0, less than 100%, but somewhere in the middle there's a piece of this that is purely symbolic in the sense that the bridge was inaugurated by Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2018, and it's viewed, understandably so, as this physical link between Russia and occupied Crimea. Remember, Russia took over Crimea in 2014, and this is the physical link to that peninsula. So whatever percentage you assign to it, there is a portion that's symbolic, which is why you see a lot of Ukrainian accounts. Anytime something bad happens to the Kerch Bridge, there's a lot more celebration than you might expect, or not more celebration. It kind of outpaces traditional military victories on the battlefield. And the reason for that is the symbolic nature of the bridge. Now, in turning into what the estimates might be here, what actually might be playing out, we just saw the one explosion. Right out the gate, there were some concerns coming from Russia that this was the beginning of a larger operation. Maybe, but it doesn't appear to have played out so far today. Of course, going back to the SBU statement, this was the first device, so entirely possible there's more than one that could be detonated at future times. That probably means that Russia is going to have to do a big sweep to figure out, are there actually more devices planted along this bridge? There's also the possibility that others were set to detonate and did not. Again, if we're going back to Ukraine's statement here that the goal was to detonate it early in the morning to minimize or prevent any civilian casualties, then it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to then detonate the next one in the middle of the day now that traffic has been turned back on. So it is possible that a second, third, fourth, whatever charge did not detonate when it was supposed to. We have to keep that in mind. There's also, it looks like there may have been part of a larger operation. Russia released earlier today this footage showing a Lancet loitering munition striking and eliminating an unmanned surface vessel launched by Ukraine. The way and the timing they released this kind of suggested that it was tied to the Kerch Bridge attack. Of course, this could have been old footage as well. This is an ongoing battle in the Black Sea. There's the drone wars, really. Ukraine is increasingly using these unmanned surface vessels to attack targets and shoot down aircraft in the Black Sea, and Russia is more and more using unmanned aerial vehicles like Lancet loiter munitions to try to intercept them. Another one that I saw here was, so one possibility there is some of these drone boats were intercepted, didn't actually make it to their targets. Another piece I've seen is people saying that this is a warning to Russia. That doesn't make a lot of sense. look, it doesn't do a lot of, there's not a lot of value in Ukraine making its way through all of these Russian defenses and kind of knocking on the door and saying, see, we could have gotten you if we wanted to, because now Russia is going to try to seal up any of those gaps in their security. It's going to be harder next time for Ukraine to carry this out, or if nothing else, Russia is going to be more focused on this new way that Ukraine attacked the bridge. So I don't think this was just a way to warn Russia that they could do more. Now, some more Russian reactions here. Two majors says continuing negotiations with those who consider terrorist acts against civilian infrastructure to be normal practice is pointless. Such actions confirm one thing: Ukraine does not intend to move towards peace. Its supporters continue to play at escalation. The answer must be tough. The world cannot be one-sided. And this comes amidst, of course, the talk in the last couple of days that Russia is going to respond in some way, shape, or form to Operation Spiderweb, the attack on Russia's strategic aviation the other day that has not yet materialized, from what we can tell. All of the attacks up to this point have been pretty consistent with what was happening before that attack took place. Now, I mentioned it wasn't just the bridge that was hit yesterday. We also saw kind of a unique aspect here where power substations were hit in a Ukrainian drone attack in occupied portions of Zaporozhye and Kherson. So turning again to some Russian media here, TASS, they said Ukraine used fixed-wing aviation, UAVs, to carry out this massive attack. As many as 457 settlements of Zaporozhye remain without electricity, and that's according to the governor there. They say the power outage affected more than 600,000 residents. So this was pretty significant. We have a map of the Ukrainian drone attack taking off last night, and thick red in southern Ukraine. So clearly there are quite a few UAVs used in this attack. A couple thoughts on this. First off, very similar to the Kerch Bridge. When you get into some of these occupied territories, a lot of things are dual use. It's not exclusively civilian. The Russian military in some of these occupied territories is far from 100% self-sufficient. So when the power goes out, it's at the very least a hiccup and an inconvenience to any military forces in that area. It's going to have an immediate impact on communications, logistics, electronic warfare to a degree, depending on the capabilities they have set up. So when you see something like this, very clearly going after the energy infrastructure in occupied territories, it does raise the question of, is something else coming? Are you setting the stage for something else? Rather than going after surface-to-air missile systems, air defense assets, electronic warfare, or even artillery systems, it's unique going after power generation. So we'll have to keep an eye on the south. Of course, this comes right alongside the largest attack on the Kerch Bridge in quite some time. Now, an area, while this is all happening and we're kind of getting caught up in talking about these Ukrainian operations, of course, Operation Spiderweb, I think, deserves all the attention that it's getting and more. And now the attack on the Kerch Bridge. Meanwhile, Russia continues to advance in Sumy, and it looks like they're going to focus more and more of their attention there. In fact, overnight, they carried out an MLRS strike, multiple launch rocket system strike, into Sumy, hitting civilians. So we have a video here and a statement from Ukrainian President Zelensky saying, quote, "The Russians launched a savage strike on Sumy, directly targeting the city and its ordinary streets with rocket artillery. It was a fully deliberate attack on civilians. A rescue operation is currently underway. Many people have been wounded. As of now, 3 people have been confirmed dead. At least one MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, shell was a dud. It pierced the wall of an ordinary apartment room on the 9th floor. That alone says everything one needs to know about Russia's so-called desire to end this war. Not a single day goes by without Russia striking Ukrainian cities and villages. Every day, we lose our people to Russian terror. Every day gives new reasons for tougher sanctions and stronger support for our defense. I'm grateful for everyone around the world who is promoting exactly this agenda: sanctions for aggression and the killing of people, and assistance in defending the lives of Ukrainians." And on that note, as of this recording, it's 11 a.m. on June 3rd, 2025, we haven't heard anything from President Trump, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, or Secretary of State / National Security Advisor Marco Rubio on the bridge attack or Operation Spiderweb, the attack on Russia's strategic aviation. I don't know that I would read too much into that in one direction or the other, but it is interesting when you think about it, because this is, again, pretty significant attacks. If nothing else, some of Russia's nuclear triad was just crippled and completely taken offline. That's a real impact to U.S. national security. And when you wade into comment sections online, it's all about how nuclear war is almost here and we poked the bear and this is bad for the United States. And either way, however you view this, whether you view it as a net positive or a net negative, it's still kind of interesting that we haven't heard anything from the top in the U.S. administration. We have had comments from representatives and senators, some pushing for more sanctions coming up here against Russia and praising the Ukrainian attack a couple days ago, but nothing from the very top. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach this. Now, in talking about the attacks in Sumy, I wanted to pull up a map here, deep state map, to show how this has kind of progressed in recent days and some plans that Russia might have for this specific region. So zooming in on the northeast portion here, here we have Sumy, some of the territories up here to the north. You can see the front lines at this point, if you get on the northern portion of Sumy, front lines at this point about 25 kilometers away. So depending on this type of multiple launch rocket system, Sumy is well within range of some of those, as we mentioned in that video just a second ago. Now, when you look at the progress here that Russia has made, it's actually sped up in recent days. So the reason I like deep state maps is we can go back and kind of look at how it's changed over. We'll go back. There we go. How about from May 20th? So 2 weeks ago, all right, to give you an idea. And if we go day by day, the red here is confirmed taken over by Russian forces. It's continuing to advance. It's not a lot, is one of those things, right? It's not a massive amount of territory, but it's significantly faster paced than we're seeing anywhere else along the front, to include down south. When you go down near Pokrovsk and Toretsk and up near Chasiv Yar, Russia's not seen anywhere near this progress in the south. So it's possible that they are prioritizing the Sumy direction. In fact, that's something that Russian mill blogger Alexander Kotz talked about just earlier today, where he said, quote, "Of course, to take a city with a population of almost 300,000 residents, serious forces, and a full-fledged combined arms operation will be needed." He's talking about taking Sumy, not just pushing in, but actually taking the entirety of this city. He said, however, without control over Sumy, it is premature to talk about creating a buffer zone between Russia and Ukraine. President Putin talked about this recently, saying one of the requirements, one of his orders for the military is creating this buffer zone. And as we have seen, down here in Kharkiv, a few kilometer buffer zone doesn't do much. Ukraine is still very capable of launching drones and munitions into Belgorod or elsewhere from here. So a small buffer zone doesn't do, which leads Kotz here to talk about, hey, maybe we should just take all of Sumy. He says, theoretically, the attack can be supported by a strike from the Belgorod region from the Russian border town of, I'm going to butcher it, I know, I'm going to get it wrong here, down here, Kolotilovka, right here. So he talks about a Russian advance from here. It looks like this was one of their axis of advance in the initial invasion. This green is as far as they got back in 2022. He said this will allow us to take control of the P-45 highway. He also said, we already have experience in taking large cities. Mariupol, for instance, is 1.5 times larger than Sumy in terms of population and more than twice as large in terms of area. It was liberated, as we recall, in less than 3 months. Now, a lot of differences between the opening days of the war in 2022 and Sumy in 2025, but one notable one here that I want to call out is Mariupol there were advances coming from multiple directions. So they had Russians coming in from the east. This area here that is kind of pinkish was occupied by Russia in 2014, and they had forces pushing up from Crimea towards moving east towards Mariupol. So very quickly, this area, and when you look at the defense of Ukraine across the entirety of the country in the opening days and weeks, the south is where a lot of it fell apart quickly, and Russian forces were able to advance relatively rapidly. So Mariupol was faced with a situation where they quickly got surrounded. It's hard to envision that same type scenario. So there was a blockade of sorts, right? It's hard to envision that happening up here with Sumy, right? I mean, it's kind of quite the opposite at this point. As Russia advances further towards the city, they're going to be facing Ukraine on at least 3 sides. But nonetheless, that does appear to be a focus of the Russian summer-spring offensive 2025. But that's all we got for now. We'll keep an eye out for more information on the Kerch Bridge as it becomes available. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.